Since way back at the beginning of the Bush administration when we were both working for Attorney General Ashcroft, and I think that's how he kept my number and got me here. But it is a great honor to be here and to be part of this panel and with some really great minds on the stage and off. And I'll try to give a quick summary of what I think we ought to do. And for all of the fangs and forked tail description you've been hearing, I mean, my point of view is simply that we should enforce our laws. I'm a lawyer and I believe in the rule of law. I believe the reason most people want to come to the United States is because of the rule of law. If you build a business here, no one's going to demand extortion money or protection money. You keep your property. We have laws to protect you. That's why we are such a successful nation. And so, if you begin with the premise that the rule of law is a good thing, you also can take this premise, which I assume we'll all agree, that we want to have immigration, but we want to have immigration that is in our national interest. The only way you have immigration that is in your national interest is if your immigration laws are enforced. If you can't enforce your laws, then your immigration policy becomes whatever other people individually choose when they decide to immigrate or not. So therefore, we want immigration, but we want it to be legal, and we want it to be in the national interest. Now, I hope I haven't said anything that offends anyone yet. Okay, so then how do we do that? And I'll go to the piece of the 11 to 12 million people that are here right now. Now, we are often presented a false dichotomy, and the dichotomy is this. Well, you've only got two choices. Either you have to grant an amnesty, or you have to round them all up at gunpoint and put them on buses and send them home. And we can't do that. That would be too expensive, too difficult, and just impossible to do. But that's a false dichotomy. With any law enforcement problem, no one ever says you only have two choices, an amnesty or total enforcement. Imagine a section of Highway 35, Interstate 35, where no patrolman had been on it for 10 years. What would the effective speed limit be? It'd be 100 miles per hour plus, right? Especially in Texas. Of course, I know you already have that in some parts of your area, but you'd have a really, you wouldn't say, well, and then suddenly people started dying on this highway. They said, okay, we got to stop this problem. Well, we've got only two choices. Either we declare it an Autobahn and don't enforce the law, or we catch 100% of the speeders. No, the third choice is the rational choice, and that is you ratchet up the level of enforcement slowly, and you change the behavior of rational human beings. And so you don't put out 100 state patrol officers, you put out 5 or 10, and everybody slows down because they make a different cost-benefit calculation in their mind. The chances of getting caught are higher, the benefits are lower, therefore I choose to slow down. You do the same thing with immigration policy, an area where you have chronic law enforcement, disobedience of law enforcement, and you ratchet up the level of enforcement, and you see that people will start slowing down. And in immigration law, that means returning home. And it's already been said by several speakers, and there's a common misconception out there that when people come into the country illegally, they just stay forever, or as long as they can. That's not true. There's a huge churn in our illegal alien population. In the growth years of like 03 to 08, right before the economy took a turn south, we saw probably 400,000 to 500,000, some years maybe 600,000 coming in illegally, but we saw 200,000 to 300,000 leaving and going back. And so the key is to change the calculation and reverse those numbers. We don't have to grant an amnesty if we don't want to. We don't have to round people up either. So and it has worked empirically. Let me give you two examples of where it's worked empirically. One is in Arizona. So Arizona wasn't just the 2010 law. They passed a series of laws. In 2005, they made human smuggling a state crime, and they started enforcing it. 2006, they cut off welfare benefits to illegal aliens. 2007, they became the first state to make E-Verify mandatory for all employers in the state. And then in 2010, they passed the law that you heard about in the news. On top of that, in Maricopa County with Sheriff Joe Arpaio, they were aggressively enforcing all of those laws. What happened? In 2008, when the E-Verify law went into effect, there was a mass exodus of people illegally in the country leaving Arizona. And statistically, the numbers bear that out. So you heard some numbers this morning. Between 2008 and 2011, the illegal alien population in the United States dropped 1%, and because the economy went south and it was kind of static. In Arizona, over that same 3-year period, according to U.S. government figures, the population dropped 30% because of attrition through enforcement. And that's that third way. You start enforcing the law, people start obeying the law, and they start correcting their own behavior. In one sort of comic bit of evidence of that, in February or March of 2008, a delegation of 9 state senators from Sonora, Mexico, came north to visit state legislators in Arizona and complain that their law was having too significant effect too quickly, and that too many of their own nationals were returning home to Sonora too quickly. They didn't have the infrastructure, they didn't have the schools, they didn't have the housing to support them. And they were complaining to Arizona that your law has caused this problem for us. So evidently Arizona's duty was to provide the infrastructure. Second example, 2-minute warning. Second example is at the federal level. We've never done this as a nationwide policy, tried to enforce our laws in a way that really sends a message to people we're serious now. But we have done it right after 9/11 in a very concentrated way with the NSEERS program, the National Security Inter-Exit Registration System. Long story short, it's a program where we tried to track people coming to the United States from high-risk zones, state sponsors of terrorism, Afghanistan, Iraq, places where Al-Qaeda had a presence, and we were actually requiring those people to come in, verify where they were living, giving us information and fingerprints, and we were enforcing the law. The government, the largest contingent of those high-risk individuals were from the country of Pakistan. We deported, in that period, 2002, 2003, we deported 1,500 Pakistani people in the country illegally. But according to the government of Pakistan, 15,000, 10 times that number, self-deported because they knew that the law was being enforced, unfortunately for them, but specifically on people of that nationality at that time in the wake of 9/11. And so they said, hey, my cost-benefit calculation has changed. I'm leaving on my own. I'd rather leave on my own in my own vehicle, packing up my bags on my own schedule with my own plan, rather than leaving in handcuffs. And so it shows that it works. Attrition through enforcement can work as a national strategy. And how do we do that in the United States? Nationally, you make E-Verify mandatory nationwide. You do have physical barriers because we've seen there a force multiplier on the border. You do have a Section 287G program ramped up where you have more help from state and local officials. And there are a bunch of other things you can do that just and we bring back worksite enforcement. Director Saldana said we were continuing with worksite enforcement. No, worksite enforcement has basically crashed since January 2009. You haven't seen a single worksite raid of a place of employment since the beginning of the Obama administration. You bring back worksite enforcement, do all of these things, it'll change the cost-benefit calculation, and people will start making the decision to return home voluntarily. And then we can get on with a legal immigration policy that puts the United States national interest first. And that might be high-skilled workers, it might be family reunification, but it's something we can decide and control the flow to control our country's future.
And we're moving fast right now, but we've got a lot of time. We're moving fast right now because I want to plow through these opening statements, but we really have a lot of